Hi there, I'm Chris Hoffman. I am the Group Vice President here at Medscape Medical Affairs. I am joined today by my colleague in Medical Affairs, Alessandro Albuquerque. And Alessandro is the Vice President of Med Affairs in Sanofi's CV and Established Products section. Welcome.
Hi, Chris.
It's so good to have you.
I'm pleased to be here.
I appreciate you making time. We're here at ESC, and it's a busy meeting, so we'll get right to it. I have a couple questions for you, and when I'm asking you these things, I'm really, having worked closely with you on a number of occasions, I think there's some great insights that you as a leader in Med Affairs can share with other folks in the industry. So we'll get started with that first question. So here we go. How do you see the Med Affairs division bringing value to Sanofi as a whole? And you can answer it not just in how it is now, but maybe where you want to take the organization.
Absolutely. This is a great question because we always struggle to demonstrate the true value of medical affairs. Since the very beginning, when we built the first medical affairs organizations for compliance reasons, away from the commercial organization back in the 90s. For a lot of reasons, the medical affairs organization was built in a kind of an ivory tower, and with a lot of firewalls between medical and commercial organizations. And I don't get me wrong, there are very valid reasons for why the firewalls are there. However, that doesn't mean that we cannot collaborate and be partners with the rest of the organization. And I think one of the biggest problems we have is because the rest of the organization, mainly the commercial organization, struggle to understand the value of medical because everything that we do, as opposed to everything that commercial does, don't necessarily have the right metrics. And so it's very hard for us to communicate, for instance, when it comes to medical education, how effective we are and if we are really helping the organization to move the needle, if you want. Therefore, we need to rethink the way we demonstrate the impact of educational efforts coming from medical. There's just no other way other than developing nice metrics to really communicate in a compliant way to the rest of the organization how you are bringing value. And this is super important for us, not only because, of course, as part of a bigger organization, we are going to be recognized as a strategic partner, but also because we wanted to understand better what are the triggers that make people move from point A to point B to point C in their own knowledge. Segmented communication have been one of the strategy for many companies. But how do you demonstrate, for instance, that you are achieving your goals within a segment, or making people moving from segment A to segment B to segment C when it comes to the degree of knowledge about a certain area of knowledge, if you want. So it's really necessary for us, for our own survival, to be honest, that we can demonstrate and articulate appropriately that message. I think the time where medical affairs was just, using the budget to, invest on education, and we can say, to the rest of the organization, yes, I invested $1 million on education, and that's it. Those days are gone. We're gonna need to say, okay, I invested and I got this as a result. And if you wanted to understand what my mind goes right now, is actually the next step is actually to use those metrics to target specific segment, specific messages that can, and even use omnichannel approach to help, fine tune your strategy and get even bigger results.
Right.
So it's really about shaping your strategy more frequently on real time, if you want, based on real metrics and getting the best utilization of the resources.
Right. I think what's interesting about what I heard you just say is it's kind of gone away from how many eyeballs did you have on that content to what impact was made when those eyeballs were having
Absolutely.
a look, right?
Yes,
So
absolutely.
And to your point, you're really talking about applying the lessons from there. Certainly, Med Affairs professionals should think about segmentation strategies. That's how they need their different needs based on a lot of different factors, right? So having data to support a segmentation strategy for accomplishing medical affairs objectives makes a great deal of sense.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you.
You talked about your commercial colleagues, and certainly that is a stakeholder within Sanofi that is important to connect and collaborate with. How about some of the other functional areas? Do you have any lessons you've learned as it relates to, and I think of medical legal, I think of procurement, I think of clinical, which is maybe the other side of the equation too. How do you think about, and what are your best practices for cross-functional relationships and building?
I think, the big lesson learned over here is how can we embrace dialogue and collaboration with the other parts of the organization, again, moving away from the ivory tower type of behavior, right? The other parts of the organization, especially the commercial organization, in many different companies are very, I think, adapted to hear medical saying no, and that's it, right? We cannot engage on this type of behavior anymore. And there are ways that we can think about, think outside of the box and make things happen, but that will only comes with communication. So my advice here is really keep an open channel of communication. Don't wait until you have a whole project designed, a whole strategy designed to start talking with legal or compliance. Involve those stakeholders from the very beginning and guide them through the process. I can give you one example. Of course, it is very difficult for compliance reasons, to look and try to get metrics around prescriptions of a specific agent. That's not compliant, period.
Right.
However, it may be compliant looking into baskets of products. It can be, whatever, anticoagulants in general,
Sure.
or antiarrhythmic medications in general, and try to show patterns of changes in a compliant way because you are no longer looking into specific drugs.
Right.
So, and I had experience involving legal and compliance with that. My advice is definitely, whenever you are developing anything, engage them earlier and try to have an open dialogue of communication. Don't expect the project to be in a very late stage and then you go there, because you can really face a situation that they will not understand your goals. They would not understand your project, and they would just say, no way I'm going to allow this to happen.
Yeah.
If you flip the game and start this open discussion, I think it's more realistic to expect that they will understand your goals. And maybe they will say no, and that's fine, but they will give you ideas just because you are involving them, and they will be equally, helpful and creative with you.
Yeah, right. So really it's starting early, having the conversation, get them to collaborate on the early side of it so that they see where you're going. And then if where you're going is they aren't 100% in on, they can help you find another way because you've come early enough that it's not well, it's either now or never kind of thing, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. So those are great pieces of advice there. You started to talk a little bit about this, but this question I have here is, you talked about demonstrating value to Sanofi. You talked about cross-functional collaboration. Now, how do you think about demonstrating value to your customers, the HCPs that you're working with? What does that look like as it relates to whether it's innovative medical education, getting segmentation information? How do you help your end customers?
When it comes to how we communicate with them, how we engage them, how we generate insights from them, I think the key message is we assume too much. Mm-hmm. We assume too much, and we should not assume too much. We should never assume that, first and foremost, one size fits all, because it does not.
It never does. Right.
It never does. Uh-huh. So let's go back one step and talk about the segmentation, right? Once you understand, the segments you wanted to communicate and how you're going to communicate with them, then it comes about, how you're going to frame this discussion, what channels they use. I think a lot of people talk about omnichannel, but they really don't practice omnichannel, which is all about changing your message to achieve the right communication with the customer, using the way they want to receive the information, not the way you want to deliver the information.
Yep.
And I'll give you an example. For instance, when it comes to how you communicate with electrophysiologists versus the general cardiologists versus the primary care physicians, their needs, and this is, independent of brand or disease, the way you communicate to different communities is just different, because you cannot assume that, a primary care physician that deals with, literally thousands of potential diseases will have the same time and dedication that an electrophysiologist will have, or understanding that they will have about a certain area of knowledge.
Right.
And therefore, a primary care physician may want the information digested in a way that you can only have probably 30 seconds of attention and get right to the message. And that's okay. But I continuously seen medical and even commercial teams, and whereas medical can, again, coming back to your first question, bring value to the organization, is, avoiding commercial colleagues entering this kind of behavior of, okay, this is the brand message. Mm-hmm. These are the brand imperatives. Mm-hmm. Well, your brand imperatives to what? To whom, right? How are you going to target this? And I think medical, because of, our knowledge of the disease, our knowledge of the environment, our insights, we can really sit at a table and contribute effectively to target messages using different approaches and different ways of communicating with the HCPs.
Well, and that is so aligned, actually, with the way McKinsey and colleagues put together a paper maybe a couple of years ago, Medical Affairs for 2025. And just talking about the three-legged stool, if you will, right? Commercial, clinical, and Med Affairs has the ability to be that third strategic pillar in the organization, but sometimes falls short. So imagine a stool with one of its legs short. It's not a very stable stool. And so, again, what you're just talking about is spot on to that. Like, Med Affairs, be the stool, be the length of that you need to be, yes, and bring value to the organization by bringing value to your customers and learning how it resonates or doesn't, right? So it's like a continuous cycle. All right, I'm going to go to my last question for you is a future focus question. So recently, Medical Affairs Professional Society, or MAPS, put together their roadmap for Med Affairs into 2030. And one of the things that caught my attention in that list was about patient centricity and Med-Affairs coming to be the, if you will, owner of the non-promotional face of pharma to patients. I don't know if you've given a lot of thought to that yet, but if you have, I'd love to hear, how are you thinking about the patient? We've heard about voice of the patient forever, right? But how do you deliver on patient centricity in Med-Affairs?
It's a great question, and I think for many years, if not decades, we undervalue the voice of the patient or the value of the patient, especially having patients as our most strategic advocates to receive adequate therapy. And this is the way I see patients. And in the future of medical affairs, I think we more and more trying to engage with the patients in a way they can advocate for the best quality care, for guideline-directed medical therapy. But how to do it, right? That's the key point. I think today we are in a very different situation compared to many years ago, because we have innovative tools to communicate with the patients. One example that I am exploring is using, for instance, the Apple Watch platform, right? A lot of patients, mainly in the United States, but also in other parts of the world, they use Apple Watches for a variety of things, including to check on their cardiac rhythm and for daily exercise and things like that. So using the Apple Watch platform is just one example, but using a platform that you can engage directly with the patient, I think is the next step of medical patient communication. And I really, we are right now thinking outside the box on how we can use platforms as Apple Watch, but there are other platforms and patient advocacy groups to understand how the patients perceive the treatment they are receiving. Is that treatment giving the patient a pleasant experience? Is the treatment capable of decreasing the burden of the disease? And even using that as a two-channel communication with the patient, because if I really believe these innovative platforms, and again, Apple Watch being one of them, but there are many others, it can even enable the medical affairs organization to be the middle ground of contact between the patient and the provider, right? And bringing value to both, by the way. I really think strategically about that. I think the next step of engagement in medical affairs would be using electronic platforms, expensive data collection tools to make sure patients are receiving the adequate treatment, and to open a dialogue both with us and the providers.
Yeah, that is an awesome vision, actually, and very, and completely going back to our very first bit was incredibly compliant, because the goal is ultimately to improve care and guideline-based care when it gets down to it, and because we know so often that's not happening in every single therapeutic area, notwithstanding the ones I know you know too well. So, Alex, it has been a pleasure chatting with you. Thank you so much for coming and giving the insights of your own experiences and your vision to other Med-Affairs professionals. And we would love to have you join us in future podcasts. Thank you to the audience for joining us as well.
Likewise, thank you very much for the opportunity.
Indeed.